That ship sailed. I'm discouraged about the whole thing.
I mean, there could be some healing this next year coming up.
Today, we are not inside a TLC episode, not on the dusty roads of Coyote Pass, and not within the walls of a familiar Flagstaff home. No, today. We find ourselves under the sterile fluorescent lights of a courtroom, a place where laughter, excuses, and staged family smiles carry no weight. Here, only truth matters. And at the center of this storm is Kody Brown. This was not the Kody viewers met in the early seasons. She was no longer the woman begging for attention, quietly adjusting herself to fit into Kody's hierarchy. No, this was a woman who had walked through fire and emerged tempered, holding in her hands not bitterness, but evidence. In her arms, the infamous binder, thicker, heavier, no longer a whisper of suspicion, but a thunderclap of revelation. The moment she entered, the room shifted. Not in sound, but in energy. Courtrooms often carry an invisible balance of power, and today that balance tilted instantly in her favor. The echo of her heels across the scuffed wooden floor silenced the whispers of those seated behind. Even the court clerk, who had typed through countless cases without distraction, paused to watch her. Kody Brown was already seated at the defense table. His posture was stiff, his expression taut with a kind of forced composure that comes only from fear. He clasped his hands so tightly the skin whitened. His jaw worked in restless motion, grinding down nerves he couldn't speak aloud. For years, Kody had thrived on control, raising his voice, shutting down conversations, storming out of rooms. But here, those theatrics carried no weight. The law was not impressed by volume. Beside him sat his attorney, a sharp-suited man who looked more like a crisis manager than a seasoned courtroom fighter. His eyes darted between Kody's binder and Kody's twitching movements. Already, he seemed to sense this case was not going to follow the script Kody had rehearsed in his head. And there, one row back, sat Robyn Brown, not beside her husband, not shielding him as she once did on reality TV, but slightly behind the posture of someone who wanted to be close, yet not too close to the blast radius of an explosion she could no longer control. Her tissue box was already in hand, yet her face betrayed not grief but worry. If Kody's binder contained what fans long suspected, financial proof, secret deals, hidden contracts, then Robyn's carefully curated image of innocence might collapse. Alongside Kody's, the judge entered steady.com, an unshakable presence. Adjusting his glasses, he spoke in a voice that carried quiet authority. We are here to review the closing arguments regarding custodial arrangements and property disputes between Mr. Brown and Mrs. Brown. Mrs. Brown, do you have any further documents to submit to the court? Kody did not flinch. She rose, her movements controlled, her binder gripped with the firmness of someone who has prepared for this very moment. Yes, Your Honor, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. This binder contains every document relevant to this case, including financial concealment, coercive agreements, and a 2014 custody contract that Mr. Brown forced me to sign but later denied ever existed. The air shifted instantly. What should have been a routine closing became a revelation. The words custody contract rolled across the room like thunder. Kody leaned forward, agitated. That's a lie. She's inventing this now, he muttered, his voice low, but not low enough. Kody's response was measured, unwavering. You instructed me to sign that contract in front of our counselor. You told me it was a safeguard, but in truth, it was a leash. I signed because I was frightened, and you knew it. But I kept a copy, and I gave one to my sister for safekeeping. You cannot erase that. From the back, Robyn gasped a sharp intake of breath that cut the silence. The judge adjusted his glasses again, his expression tightening. We will recess briefly while I review the binder. Kody returned to her seat, hands folded, her expression calm. She did not smirk. She did not gloat. She simply waited. Years of silence had trained her for patience, and today, that patience was her weapon. Across the table, Kody leaned into his attorney, whispering in frantic bursts. The lawyer did not reply. His gaze remained locked on the binder, as though it were a grenade resting on the judge's desk. pin already pulled. The sound of turning pages filled the courtroom. The judge read silently, occasionally pausing, his brow furrowed. Each rustle of paper carried weight. For Kody, it was the sound of his empire crumbling. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mrs. Brown," he began, his voice deliberate. "This 2014 draft contract does indeed bear your signature and Mr. Brown's. You allege it was signed in the presence of a counselor." Christine stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Our counselor witnessed it. I have an email confirmation from her verifying the session, and I have time-stamped scans. Mr. Brown abandoned the contract once he realized it gave me legal protection. For 9 years, he denied its existence. Now the proof is here." The judge turned his gaze towards Kody. "Mr. Brown, do you deny this is your signature?" Kody's lips parted, but no words emerged at first. His face drained of color. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't believe it was binding. It was emotional talk, not legal agreement." The judge tapped his pen against the desk. "Yet you signed. Unless you are alleging forgery." Kody snapped. "No, I'm not accusing her of forgery." "Then it stands as admissible evidence," the judge concluded. The blow landed hard. Christine did not move, did not react. But the silence that followed was louder than any outburst. Robyn leaned forward, her whisper sharp, desperate. "Why didn't you tell me about that agreement?" Kody did not answer. He couldn't. The judge continued, his voice steady. "This binder also contains financial records of property transfers in Flagstaff. Mrs. Brown, can you explain the discrepancies?" Christine rose again. "Yes, Your Honor. In 2021, after I separated, Kody transferred deeds into an LLC registered under Robyn's maiden name. He told the family it was for tax purposes. In truth, it removed every other wife from ownership, including me." The courtroom shifted again. Murmurs rippled through the observers. The judge raised his brow. "So, Mr. Brown, after your separation, you altered ownership filings to exclude Mrs. Brown from shared assets." Kody's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge silenced him with a look. Christine spoke again, her voice unwavering. "He wanted to erase me, not just from his life, but from everything we built together." The judge's pen tapped again, the sound echoing like a gavel. "Mr. Brown, this court will now review potential concealment of assets." Christine inhaled slowly, the weight of years lifting with every breath. This was no longer a battle of emotions. This was truth being chiseled into record. And for the first time in years, Kody Brown had no script to hide behind. Robyn placed a trembling hand over her mouth. She did not speak, but her silence was louder than any protest. Janelle and Mary were absent, yet their absence thundered through the room as if they were specters haunting the walls. Everyone could feel them, the weight of the women who had walked away, their presence carved out by absence itself. The judge leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses. His tone was firm, deliberate. "So, Mrs. Brown, you are stating that Mr. Brown was not actively involved in parenting duties for over 2 years?" Christine inhaled deeply, her voice almost trembling, but sharpened by resolve. "Unless we are counting unanswered phone calls, Your Honor, then yes." The words lingered, cutting through the courtroom like a blade. And then, finally, Kody broke. Not with one of his usual outbursts, not with the bravado of a man used to shouting down opposition, but in the voice of someone collapsing under his own weight. "I was overwhelmed," he muttered, his eyes fixed on the table. "I didn't know how to be a father to children who weren't under the same roof." The judge's reply was flat, without sympathy. "Mr. Brown, that is the nature of joint custody. Inconvenience is not a justification for abandonment." Silence followed. Christine's hands twitched ever so slightly, then steadied. She reached into her pocket and unfolded a creased piece of paper, worn at the edges, as though handled often. She walked to the center of the courtroom and presented it. "This," she said, her voice steady, "was written by my daughter the night she overheard a conversation between her father and Robyn." The clerk took it, placing it into the judge's hands. The room held its breath as he read aloud. "If she leaves, we cut her out. No more help. No more coverage. No more sharing. She decided this, so let her pay. The judge's eyes flickered upward in quiet shock. And whose words were these intended to capture? Christine did not answer. She didn't need to. Every gaze in the room had already turned toward Kody. His face contorted, rope-like tension tightening every muscle. Denial hung unsaid, but no one believed it could save him now. The illusion of a devoted father fighting for his children cracked apart in that instant. What remained was a man trying desperately to preserve a picture that no longer existed. The judge placed the note aside and gestured. Proceed with the next exhibit. Christine did not falter. She drew another sheet from her binder, this one sealed in a plastic sleeve. Dated the 14th of April, 2021. She handed it forward. This, she declared, is the document that changed everything for me. An email from Mr. Brown's financial planner. It was mistakenly CC'd to me because at the time I was still listed on one of the LLCs. What I read sickened me. The judge slipped on his reading glasses and began. His voice was measured, yet the words grew heavier with each line. As agreed upon at our last meeting, the reorganization of the Coyote Pass asset tree must be completed prior to Christine's filing. Robyn remains the most suitable beneficiary due to her credit score and legal access. Per instruction, Christine and Janelle are to be omitted from the draft agreement. The room froze. No cough, no shuffle, no breath broke the stillness. Kody leaned forward, his tone defensive, cracking. That was just a planning draft. It wasn't executed. It wasn't. The judge raised a palm. Is your name listed here as the party instructing these omissions? Kody swallowed hard, voice barely audible. Yes, but it was strategy. Nothing more. Christine's reply was not heated. It was quiet, almost mournful. You told me it was for the children, that you were protecting what we built. But the truth was, you were moving it all into Robyn's hands behind our backs. That is not protection. That is betrayal. Robyn stared down at the table in front of her, motionless, unblinking. The judge turned to the second page of the email. His expression hardened. Here it says, ensure Christine's post-separation paperwork is digitally cleaned before transfer. The words hung like a noose. Kody's jaw dropped, but no sound came. The judge pressed. Would you like to explain that, Mr. Brown? I didn't write that. That's the planner's phrasing, he stammered. And yet you never intervened. Christine replied, her voice soft but heavy with truth. You allowed it. That was when I understood you were not just absent. You were calculated. The shift was palpable. The judge no longer viewed Kody as careless, but as deliberate. He scribbled a note, his pen scratching with finality. This corresponds with the revocation of Mrs. Brown's account access, the unauthorized property transfers, and the demonstrated neglect of custody. We are no longer simply reviewing a separation. We are reviewing erasure by design. Kody's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, I must object to this framing. The judge's voice cut like stone. Sit down. Your client weaponized corporate structures to divert assets while deceiving his spouse. This is not spin. This is evidence. Christine, composed, reached into her binder once more. Her final piece for the day. She handed forward a yellowed letter, its ink slightly faded. And here, she said quietly, is the 2015 letter he wrote me. The one he forgot I still had. In it, he promised the Flagstaff house would be placed in my name within 3 years. The judge read in silence. Then he nodded slowly. This court finds grounds to award full custodial responsibility to Mrs. Brown. Furthermore, asset reassignment shall be formally examined. A single sentence, but it shook the very foundation of the man who had once ruled a plural household like a king. Kody sat motionless, his frame slumped forward. His shoulders no longer squared with defiance, but sagged with defeat. The scent of power, the intangible aura he had wielded for decades, had drained from the room. In its place lingered only the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the unmistakable odor of unraveled authority. Christine did not smile. She did not revel. Her face was solemn, composed, the face of a woman who had already grieved her losses in private. Now she was simply ensuring the truth carved itself into the record. The judge lifted the binder again, turning to the next section marked Custodial Clauses Supplemental. Inside were signed letters from school principals, each attesting that Christine had been the sole emergency contact for her children for 4 years. Medical consent forms bore only her name. Therapist records confirmed Kody had not attended a single session since 2019. The judge's gaze pierced through him. "Mr. Brown, can you explain why your name is absent from every parental document in the past 4 years?" Kody cleared his throat, fumbling. "I was focused on the older children. The pandemic made travel harder. Christine. She wasn't exactly inviting me in." Christine's reply was swift, her voice cutting clean. "I invited you. Again and again. You chose not to come." She handed forward another page, a printed screenshot of a text exchange. "Dad, are you going to come to parent night?" No reply. "I wish you'd just show up, even if it's uncomfortable." No reply. Christine's voice cracked for the first time. That was truly, she wept when he didn't answer. The judge exhaled heavily, the weight of it filling the silence. It is clear this court cannot grant custody to a parent who has abandoned involvement so utterly. Kody opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. For the first time, there was no performance, no spin left to offer. There were no cameras to impress. Only truth. And truth left him stripped bare. Only truth. And truth left him stripped bare. The courtroom air felt like it had thickened into something almost tangible, pressing down on every shoulder, every breath, every nervous movement of hand against wood. It was no longer a simple legal proceeding. It was theater, judgment, reckoning, and unraveling all folded into one. Christine stood steady, her binder clasped against her chest like armor she had finally dared to reveal. For years, that woman had walked through life carrying proof, memories, bruises that did not mark skin but burrowed into the mind, layered arguments rehearsed in silence, and the heavy knowledge that she was ignored each time she tried to speak. Today, none of it was ignored. Today, her words were anchored in documents, in evidence, in the cold weight of receipts and statements that could no longer be waved away with Kody's charm or Robyn's tears. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She stood like someone who had carried a stone up a mountain and finally set it down not in victory, but in release. The silence that followed the judge's ruling was not just silence. It was the cracking of a myth, the slow disintegration of an empire that had always been fragile, even as Kody declared it eternal. Kody himself looked like a monument that had been struck by lightning. His shoulders hunched, his once boastful posture bent inwards as though trying to shield itself from blows that were no longer physical, but reputational, spiritual, existential. He blinked too often, the rapid flutter of a man trying to keep composure and failing. His eyes darting around the courtroom not to see who was present, but to search for an escape that did not exist. The swagger that once filled living rooms, family meetings, and TLC cameras was absent. What remained was a hollowed version of him. A man still dressed as a patriarch, but stripped of the illusion that his role was God-ordained. He had spoken for years about being the protector, the provider, the visionary who saw beyond the pettiness of women's squabbles. Yet here he was, voiceless, powerless, cornered by documents that told a truth he could not spin. His lawyer whispered strategies, muttered about appeals, but Kody did not respond. It was not law that defeated him. It was the collapse of belief in his authority. Without belief, the throne was only a chair, and he sat slumped upon it, king of nothing. Robyn, once his fiercest defender, sat in stunned silence. Her hand pressed so tightly against her lips that it seemed she was holding in not just words but the sob of realization. For years she had believed, no, she had known that she was the chosen one, the final wife, the partner who mattered more than the rest. In her mind, the family had become Kody and Robyn against the world. And though others called it favoritism, she called it destiny. But the judge's words, final and undeniable, had cut through that fantasy. You no longer control any joint family asset. That single sentence did not just apply to Kody, it applied to her as well. She was not shielded by love, nor by loyalty, nor by being the favorite. She was vulnerable. She was exposed. She was part of the collapse, not separate from it. The tissues she had always used as props for her tears now looked pitiful in her hands. Scraps of paper unable to shield her from the realization that she had hitched her identity to a man who was falling. And Christine's eyes, calm and unwavering, landed on her with a weight that words alone could not carry. Christine then reached into her folder one final time. Every head tilted forward, every journalist's pen hovered, ready to capture the next damning revelation. But when she pulled out the photograph, the tension shifted from suspense to poignancy. It was not another document of deception or betrayal. It was a picture of her daughter on a sunlit porch, watermelon in hand, face alight with carefree laughter. Christine's hand did not tremble. She held it gently, as if she were holding the very reason for this war. Her voice, when it came, was steady and low, and yet it carried further than all Kody's shouts ever had. "This," she said, "is what I'm protecting. Not assets. Not revenge. Just this." For a moment, the courtroom was no longer fluorescent lit walls and cold benches. It was transformed into something sacred, something raw. Even the judge paused, nodding not as a jurist but as a human being who recognized the gravity of a mother's plea. Kody's exhale broke the moment, but it was not relief, it was collapse. The sound of a balloon deflating, the slow hiss of air leaving a body that had been puffed up on self-importance. He shrank before their eyes, smaller than he had ever seemed, because power had left him, and without it, his very identity crumbled. Robyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "So, what now?" Her tone was cracked, fractured, lost. Christine's gaze slid towards her. Not cruel, not mocking, but final. "Now," she said, her voice smooth as glass, "you understand what it feels like to be left out of the plan." Those words, delivered with quiet certainty, struck harder than any folder of evidence. Robyn froze, her face lowered, her body folding inwards as though she had finally tasted the bitterness the other wives had swallowed for years. The judge stood, his robe rustling with authority as he gathered his papers and declared, "Court will recess until post-verdict compliance review." His departure was not just procedural. It was a curtain call. The play was over, and the audience, lawyers, reporters, observers knew they had witnessed not just legal history, but family collapse. Christine gathered her binder, but not like a victor clutching a prize. She carried it as one carries an old wound, proof of survival, not triumph. She stood tall, her figure silhouetted by the bland courtroom lights, and began her walk towards the exit. No shouts from reporters dared to intrude. No flash of cameras tried to steal the moment. Silence followed her. The silence of respect. The silence owed to someone who had endured long enough to earn her dignity back. Kody remained seated, unable to rise, his body heavy with the weight of irrelevance. His empire of plural wives. His dream of a single-family mansion on Coyote Pass. His belief in divine leadership, Paul had dissolved in a single afternoon. For years he had preached that his role was to build a kingdom, that his legacy would be the land, the home, the unity of a family gathered under his roof. But as Christine stepped into the Arizona sunlight, the truth was carved into the air itself. There was no kingdom, there was no unity, and Kody Brown was no ruler. Outside, her lawyer handed Christine a formal copy of the ruling. "Congratulations," he said softly, with professional detachment. She took it, glanced at the paper, then lifted her eyes to the vast blue sky overhead. "It's not a win," she murmured, her voice strong but reflective. "It's a restoration. It's a restoration."